Senator Schiff, allow me to broadcast a telephone recording for you. It dates from December 18th, 2019, which is the day immediately following your attendance at a classified briefing concerning Ukraine intelligence. This specific call was intercepted pursuant to a valid FISA warrant that was targeting individuals suspected of engaging in unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence services. The individual on the other end of the line is Jake Tapper of CNN. Would you care to articulate to this committee the nature of your discussion with Mr. Tapper the very day after you received classified intelligence? Vice President J.D. Vance's voice resonated through the secure hearing room located deep within the basement of the Capitol, carrying a tone that was neither aggressive nor theatrical, but rather the calm, measured cadence of a former prosecutor who understood precisely the strength of his case and felt no need to overstate it. Silence ensued, a complete, suffocating silence. The Senate Intelligence Committee's SCIF-sensitive compartmented information facility had been constructed for moments exactly like this one. It featured soundproof walls, electronic countermeasures, no windows, no telephones, and no recordings permitted other than the official ones. This was the sanctuary where senators received the nation's most sensitive secrets. And today, it was the place where one of those very senators was about to be confronted with evidence, suggesting he had been peddling those secrets to the media for 5 years. It was December 3rd, 2026, during a closed classified session with no press, no public, and no cameras beyond the official recording system. There were only the committee members possessing their top-secret clearances, a handful of cleared staff, stenographers, and Adam Schiff seated at the witness table, appearing as a man who had just realized his entire world was on the verge of collapse. Schiff was now 66 years old, a senator from California, having previously served 8 years as either the chairman or ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. He was the face of the Democratic opposition to Trump, the man who had led the first impeachment, who had appeared on CNN and MSNBC almost weekly for 6 years to explain classified matters to the American people, who had authored a best-selling book titled Midnight in Washington about defending democracy, and who had won his Senate seat in a landslide victory just 2 years prior. He sat at the witness table, clad in a dark suit, and wearing his signature serious expression. Yet there was a palpable tension in his posture now. His hands gripped the edge of the table tightly. His lawyers had been compelled to wait outside, as they did not possess the necessary security clearances for this facility. He was alone, facing J.D. Vance across the secure conference table, the Vice President of the United States, and, as President of the Senate, the official constitutionally empowered to preside over this hearing. Vance was 42 years old, a former Marine, a former venture capitalist, a former senator from Ohio, and before all of that, a prosecutor who understood how to construct cases and present evidence. Behind Vance sat 3 individuals who made Schiff's blood run cold: NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and Director of National Intelligence Admiral James Reynolds, all with thick binders situated in front of them, and all wearing grim expressions. The committee members appeared serious as well, including Chairman Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia who had been briefed yesterday on what was to unfold, Vice Chairman Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida, and 6 other senators from both parties, all looking as though they would prefer to be anywhere else, but knowing this matter was too significant to avoid. Schiff attempted to answer Vance's query, his voice sounding defensive as he stated that he speaks with many journalists as part of his oversight responsibilities, asserting that it is part of his job as a member of the Intelligence Committee to help the public understand. "Let me assist your memory," Vance interrupted smoothly. He reached forward and depressed a button on the secure audio system built into the conference table. The speakers crackled to life, and Adam Schiff's voice, crystal clear and unmistakable, filled the room, saying, "Jake, what I am about to tell you is highly classified, but the American people need to know the intelligence on Ukraine is damning. As Trump personally pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden, we have intercepts, we have testimony from intelligence community officials, and the evidence is overwhelming. This is worse than what we have stated publicly." Jake Tapper's voice responded, asking, "Can I report this? Can I attribute it?" Schiff's voice was heard again, instructing, "Do not attribute it to me directly. Use sources familiar with the intelligence or officials who have seen the classified briefings. I will confirm on background if your editors require verification before running it, but this needs to get out before the Senate trial commences. The American people need to understand what Trump actually did." Tapper replied, "I can work with that. When can we air it?" Schiff answered, "Tonight, if possible, tomorrow at the latest. The Senate vote is approaching, and this information could matter." Vance halted the playback. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. Several committee members looked physically ill. Senator Warner's face had gone pale. Even Senator Tom Cotton, the Arkansas Republican who had been skeptical about this hearing, looked shocked at actually hearing it. That was the voice of a sitting United States senator leaking classified intelligence to CNN on a recorded phone call, instructing the journalist on how to disguise the source, and coordinating the timing to influence political proceedings. It was undeniable. Schiff's face had lost all color. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged, and his hands trembled slightly against the table's edge. Vance allowed the moment to breathe, letting the recording sink in fully. Before he spoke again, his voice still calm, but now carrying an edge of steel underneath. "That is your voice, Senator Schiff. On December 18th, 2019, leaking classified intelligence about Ukraine to CNN anchor Jake Tapper Intelligence. You received the day prior, in a classified briefing, restricted to members of the House Intelligence Committee. You are telling him the specific contents of classified intercepts. You are instructing him to disguise you as anonymous sources. And you are coordinating the timing to influence the Senate impeachment trial." He paused before adding, "And that is just one call, one example. We possess 17 recorded phone conversations between you and journalists over a 5-year period. We have 83 separate leaks of classified intelligence that we have matched to briefings you attended. And every single one appeared in the news media within 72 hours of you receiving the information. We have financial records demonstrating that CNN's parent company, Warner Media, paid you $2.1 million for a book deal immediately after you became their most valuable source of classified information. We have documentary evidence proving you fabricated the Ukraine whistleblower coordination and then lied about it on national television." Vance opened his first binder and stated, "For 5 years, Senator Schiff, you have been the single biggest leaker of classified intelligence in the United States Congress. You systematically utilized your position on the Intelligence Committee to receive classified briefings, then immediately leaked that information to friendly media outlets to damage President Trump. You did not do it for oversight. You did not do it to inform the public. You did it for fame, for money, for partisan political advantage, and you compromised national security in the process." He looked directly at Schiff and said, "Let me demonstrate to this committee exactly what Adam Schiff has done." Schiff found his voice finally, declaring, "This is outrageous. This is political retaliation for my oversight of Trump. This is the new administration weaponizing intelligence agencies to go after their political opponents. This is evidence," Vance said flatly. "Phone recordings, classified documents, the leaked articles that published them, financial records, FISA warrants approved by federal judges. You can call it whatever you wish, but we are going to present what it actually is. Proof that you committed espionage. Chairman Warner spoke up, his voice strained, saying, Mr. Vice President, the committee was briefed yesterday on the broad outlines of this investigation, but hearing the actual recording is different. Before you continue, I need to ask, how was this call intercepted and under what legal authority? NSA Director Mitchell answered, the call was intercepted under a FISA warrant issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in June 2025. The warrant targeted individuals suspected of unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence services for the purpose of disclosing classified information, and Senator Schiff's communications were included based on probable cause that he was engaged in such activity. Senator Rubio asked, a federal judge approved this? Approved surveillance of a sitting member of Congress? 3 federal judges approved it, FBI Director Wray said, referencing the initial warrant and 2 renewals. They reviewed extensive evidence showing a pattern of classified information appearing in media immediately after Senator Schiff received it. They found probable cause that he was compromising national security. The standard for surveilling a member of Congress is extremely high, and we met it. Vance looked at Schiff and said, you spent 6 years positioning yourself as the guardian of classified intelligence, the watchdog protecting American secrets, the man who understood how important security was, yet you were the leak. And today, we are going to prove it with evidence you cannot spin away. He settled back in his chair and said, let's start with how we figured out it was you. And with those words, he began methodically dismantling the carefully constructed image Adam Schiff had spent decades building. The serious lawmaker concerned with national security was about to be revealed as the biggest leaker in congressional history. To understand how we arrived here, how the man who had led Trump's impeachment ended up in a classified hearing facing espionage charges, you must go back 10 hours earlier, to when Schiff walked into his office thinking this was just another routine oversight matter. 10 hours earlier, Adam Schiff sat in his Senate office, reviewing the subpoena that had been hand-delivered by the Sergeant-at-Arms the previous evening. The language was frustratingly vague. Subpoena to appear before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, classified session. Subject matter: unauthorized disclosure of classified information and related matters. That was all. There were no details about what specific information, no indication of whether he was a witness or a subject, just a time of 5 p.m. and a location at Skiff Alpha in the Capitol basement, along with a warning that failure to appear would result in contempt charges. His senior advisor, Daniel Goldman, sat across from him looking concerned. Goldman had been one of the lead lawyers during Trump's first impeachment and had worked closely with Schiff throughout that entire process. Now he served as his top Senate aide on intelligence matters. The language is unusual, Goldman said, scrolling through his tablet. Normally, these subpoenas specify what they want to discuss: Chinese election interference, Russian cyber operations, the Iranian nuclear program, but this just says unauthorized disclosure, which is vague enough to be anything. Schiff waved dismissively, though he felt a small flutter of unease, saying, "They are probably asking me about leaks I've investigated, or wanting my opinion on how to tighten security procedures. I've been dealing with classified information for 15 years, and I know how to handle these hearings. It is routine oversight." Goldman wasn't convinced, noting, "Vance personally requested to preside. The Vice President doesn't normally attend Intelligence Committee hearings, and I heard NSA Director Mitchell is testifying, which is unusual for a routine session." "Vance is grandstanding," Schiff said with confidence. "He wants to look tough on security, make it seem like he is cleaning up leaks or whatever. I will testify, answer the relevant questions, and be done by dinner. This is political theater. He had every reason to be confident. He was Adam Schiff, the man who had become a household name during Trump's presidency, who had appeared on cable news more than almost any other member of Congress, who had led the first impeachment inquiry and become a hero to Democrats nationwide. He had written a best-selling book about defending democracy that had been praised by major newspapers, and he had just won a Senate seat with over 60% of the vote. Every investigation he had been involved in, especially the Trump investigations, had made him more famous, more powerful, and more beloved by his base. His Twitter following was over 3 million, and he was regularly featured in profiles about defending democracy, having become one of the most recognizable Democrats in America. Why would this hearing be any different from the dozens of classified briefings and testimonies he had participated in over the years? What Schiff did not know, and could not have imagined, was that for 18 months, the National Security Agency had been running a Level 1 counterintelligence investigation, not targeting Russian spies or Chinese hackers, but targeting him because classified intelligence kept leaking to the media, and every single leak traced back to briefings he had attended. And J.D. Vance had spent the last month reviewing every piece of evidence, preparing to present a case that would end Schiff's career and probably send him to prison. At that exact moment in the White House Situation Room, Vance was conducting his final preparation session. It was 7:00 inches the morning, and the secure conference room deep beneath the West Wing was filled with the nation's top intelligence officials. NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell stood at a large monitor, displaying a complex timeline. She was 53 years old, had spent 30 years in signals intelligence, and looked like someone who had seen things that kept her up at night. And this case was one of them. "We have been investigating for 18 months, she began, clicking through her presentation. "It started when we noticed a pattern. Highly classified intelligence about Russia, Ukraine, China, and Iran kept appearing in New York Times and CNN articles within days of Intelligence Committee briefings. The information was too accurate, too detailed to be speculation or educated guessing. Someone was leaking." She pulled up statistics and said, "We identified 83 separate instances over 5 years where classified intelligence appeared in media shortly after committee briefings. We cross-referenced attendance records for all those briefings. Multiple members attended some of them, but only one person attended all 83 briefings." She highlighted a name on the timeline: Adam Schiff. He served on the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2023, became ranking member in 2019, then chairman, and moved to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2023, having perfect access to classified briefings throughout the entire period. FBI Director Wray spoke up from his seat at the table, saying, "We needed to confirm it was actually him and not someone else who happened to attend the same briefings, so we obtained a FISA warrant 18 months ago. The predicate was probable cause that a member of Congress was engaged in unauthorized disclosure of classified information." He pulled up legal documents and continued, "We showed the FISA court the pattern of leaks, showed that classified information was appearing in media with perfect timing and accuracy, and showed financial connections between Schiff and media companies. 3 different federal judges, 1 for the initial warrant, 2 for renewals, all found probable cause. The standard for surveilling a member of Congress is extremely high, and these judges do not approve these lightly." "What did you find?" Vance asked, though he had been briefed on this multiple times already. He wanted to hear it presented the way it would be in the hearing. Mitchell clicked to the next section and said, "We intercepted 17 phone calls over 1-2 months between Schiff and journalists, CNN's Jake Tapper, involved in 7 calls, New York Times reporters Adam Goldman and Julian Barnes in 4 calls each, and the Washington Post's Shane Harris in 2 calls. The pattern is always the same. Within 24 hours of a classified briefing, Schiff calls one of these journalists, tells them classified information, instructs them how to write the story to disguise the source, and sometimes even suggests specific phrasing. She played a clip from one of the calls where Schiff's voice said, "Don't say Intelligence Committee members were told. Say, according to officials familiar with the intelligence, that is vague enough that it could be anyone, State Department, NSC, IC directly, making it harder to trace." Vance listened to the recording again. He had heard it a dozen times, but it never became less damning. "And you have matched the calls to specific articles that were published?" Director of National Intelligence Admiral Reynolds answered. He was a career naval officer, a former submarine commander, and had run the nation's intelligence apparatus for 3 years, and he looked disgusted by what they had found. "Every single call matches to an article published within 48 hours, Reynolds said. "We have the classified briefing material. We have the call recordings. We have the published articles. We can show that information went from the classified briefing to Schiff's brain, to the journalist's notes, to the published article in less than 2 days, repeatedly and systematically for 5 years. He pulled up examples. December 17th, 2019, classified briefing on Ukraine intelligence. December 18th, Schiff calls Jake Tapper. December 19th, CNN runs a story with specific details from that classified briefing that couldn't have come from anywhere else. March 2020, classified briefing on Russian election interference. Same day, Schiff calls Adam Goldman at the NYT. Next day, The Times runs a story with information from that briefing, a perfect match. August 2021, classified briefing on Afghanistan withdrawal intelligence. Schiff calls Shane Harris at the Washington Post. 2 days later, the Post runs a story describing classified intelligence assessments that were only shared in that briefing. He showed timeline after timeline. The pattern was undeniable. Vance asked the key question: can we prove he actually read from classified documents during these calls? Or could he argue he was just sharing his general impressions and the journalists filled in details from other sources? Mitchell had the answer. We can prove it. In 4 of the calls, we caught him reading verbatim from classified documents. We have the classified documents, we have the recordings of him reading them, and we have the articles that published those exact phrases. He wasn't paraphrasing. He was literally reading classified intelligence reports to journalists over the phone. She played another recording of Schiff's voice reading in a measured tone. The Intercept shows Russian officials discussing, quote, compromat on American political figures, end quote, with specific focus on, quote, leveraging financial relationships, end quote. Then she showed the classified document where the exact same phrases appeared, followed by the CNN article that ran 2 days later, where the exact same phrasing appeared there too. That is not interpretation, Mitchell said. That is verbatim disclosure of classified intelligence. Vance turned to the next section and asked, what about the money? The book deal, Reynolds said, as he pulled up financial records. In early 2020, Warner Media, CNN's parent company at the time, gave Schiff a book deal worth a $2.1 million advance against future royalties. The book was published in late 2021, and it sold approximately 52,000 copies. That is a terrible return on a $2 million investment, as a book needs to sell several 100,000 copies to justify that kind of advance. He showed the publishing economics, noting that Warner Media lost at least $1.5 million on this deal. Why would they do that? Because they weren't paying for a book. They were paying for access. Schiff became chairman of the House Intelligence Committee in January 2019, and the leaks to CNN intensified dramatically starting then. The book deal came in early 2020, and the leaks continued through 2023. The timing is not coincidental. Can we prove quid pro quo? Vance asked. Not in a criminal sense, Reynolds admitted. Schiff can argue it was a legitimate publishing deal that happened to lose money, but the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. He got $2 million from a company whose news division he was regularly feeding classified intelligence. That is corruption. Even if we can't prove an explicit agreement, Ray added another element. We also found that Democratic organizations and progressive advocacy groups bought tens of thousands of copies of his book in bulk. Courage to Change PAC bought 20,000 copies. Democratic Alliance bought 15,000, and several others bought thousands each, totaling bulk purchases of approximately 80,000 copies. These bulk buys are how you launder money to politicians through book deals. The organizations buy books they don't need. The author gets royalties, and the money flows. Vance moved to the most explosive element, the Ukraine whistleblower. Walk me through what you found, he said. Mitchell's expression darkened as she replied, This is where it goes, from leaking to fabrication. The official story was that an intelligence community whistleblower filed a complaint through proper channels. The complaint went to the Inspector General, who forwarded it to Congress, and Schiff claimed he had no prior contact with the whistleblower, stating that repeatedly on television. She pulled up video clips showing Schiff on CNN in September 2019, saying, We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to, but the whistleblower has a statutory right to remain anonymous. Schiff on MSNBC saying, The committee did not receive the complaint from the whistleblower. We learned about it through press reports. Schiff on ABC saying, We have no prior knowledge of the contents of the whistleblower complaint, all lies. Mitchell said bluntly. We have phone records showing Schiff's staff contacted the whistleblower before the complaint was filed multiple calls. They coordinated what should be in the complaint. They shaped it for maximum political impact. Then, the whistleblower filed the complaint they had helped draft, and then Schiff went on TV and lied about having no prior contact. She showed the phone records. August 12, 2019, Schiff aide Daniel Goldman calls a number associated with a CIA analyst, later identified as the whistleblower, for a 23-minute call. August 14th, another call for 7 minutes. August 18th, another call. These calls happened before the formal whistleblower complaint was filed on August 12th. That means Schiff's office was coordinating the complaint, Vance said. And then he lied about it to make it seem like it came from independent whistleblower channels rather than Democratic committee staff. Exactly, Mitchell confirmed. That is not oversight. That is fabricating the predicate for impeachment, and then lying about it. They went through the full presentation once more. The evidence was overwhelming. 17 recorded phone calls with journalists, 83 leaks matched to his briefings, 4 instances of reading verbatim from classified documents, a $2 million book deal from a media company he was leaking to, Ukraine whistleblower coordination he lied about, and a damage assessment showing compromised intelligence operations. Vance reviewed his notes and asked, How do we present this to maximize impact? Ray had thought through the strategy. Start with one undeniable call. Play the Jake Tapper recording about Ukraine, and let his voice convict him immediately, showing he cannot deny it because we have the audio. Then show the pattern. 83 leaks over 5 years, where every single one traces to briefings he attended, making it clear this wasn't occasional sloppiness, but systematic espionage. Then the money. $2 million from CNN's parent company, showing the book economics do not make sense unless it was payment for leaking. Then the verbatim document reading, show he wasn't just sharing impressions, but was literally reading classified documents to reporters. Then, the whistleblower fabrication, show he orchestrated the impeachment predicate, then lied about it. Finally, the damage assessment, show he didn't just embarrass people, but compromised operations and got intelligence sources burned. Vance stood up and said, Adam Schiff spent 6 years as the most visible critic of Trump on intelligence matters, positioned himself as the serious, responsible lawmaker who understood how important protecting classified information was and wrote a book about defending democracy. The entire thing was a lie. He was the biggest security threat on the committee. He gathered his materials and stated, "In 5 hours, we show the Senate exactly what he has done." At 4:30 that afternoon, Adam Schiff's motorcade arrived at the Capitol. He walked through security with Daniel Goldman beside him, down to the basement level, through increasingly secure corridors to the SE entrance. A security officer checked his credentials and said, "You are cleared, Senator. Your aide needs to wait outside, unless he has TS-SCI clearance for this session." Goldman didn't, and he looked at Schiff with concern, asking, "Are you sure you don't want me to try to get emergency clearance?" Schiff shook his head and replied, "It is fine. This is standard procedure for classified sessions, and I will be out in an hour." He entered the skiff, and the heavy vault door closed behind him with a solid thunk that seemed way too final. The room was already full with committee members in their seats, but also present were people who shouldn't be there for a routine hearing. J.D. Vance, sitting at the head of the table, the NSA director, the FBI director, and the DNI, all with binders in front of them. Something was very, very wrong. At exactly 5, Vance called the hearing to order, his voice formal and serious. This classified session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is now in session. Everything discussed here is classified, top, secret, sensitive, compartmented information, and unauthorized disclosure is a federal crime. He looked directly at Schiff and said, "Senator Schiff, you have been read your rights, and you understand you are here to answer questions regarding unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence. Before we begin, do you have any questions about the proceeding?" Schiff's throat felt dry as he said, "I would like to have my counsel present. Your counsel does not have appropriate clearances for the material we will be discussing," Vance said. "You may request a delay while they obtain clearances, which typically take 6 to 8 weeks. Or we can proceed now. A delay would look terrible and would make him seem guilty." So Schiff made a decision he would regret. "I will proceed." "Very well," Vance said, opening his first binder. "For 18 months, the National Security Agency has been investigating systematic, unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence to the news media. We have identified 83 separate leaks over 5 years, and we have traced all of them to one source." He paused to let it hang there before saying, "You." Schiff felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Let me show you how we know," Vance said. "Let's start with December 18th, 2019. Your phone call to Jake Tapper." And with those words, Schiff knew his career was over. Vance looked at Schiff across the table and said, "Senator, before I play this recording, I will give you an opportunity to explain. On December 18th, 2019, the day after you received a classified briefing on Ukraine intelligence, you had a phone conversation with Jake Tapper of CNN. What did you discuss?" Schiff's mind raced. December 2019 was during impeachment, and he had spoken with lots of journalists then, all above board and all part of his oversight duties. "I spoke with many journalists during that period about impeachment. Those were appropriate communications about public matters." "This wasn't about public matters," Vance said. "This was about classified intelligence you had received the day before in a restricted briefing. But let you hear it yourself. He pressed play. The recording was crystal clear. Professional quality NSA intercept technology was the best in the world, and it showed. Schiff's own voice filled the room. Jake, what I am about to tell you is highly classified, but the American people need to know. The intelligence on Ukraine is damning, as Trump personally pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden. We have intercepts. We have testimony from intelligence community officials, and the evidence is overwhelming. This is worse than what we have stated publicly. Schiff felt sick. That was his voice on a recording, saying things he absolutely remembered saying, things he thought were private. Jake Tapper's voice asked, "Can I report this? Can I attribute it?" Schiff's voice replied, "Not attributed to me directly. Use sources familiar with the intelligence or officials who have seen the classified briefings. I will confirm on background if your editors need verification before running it, but this needs to get out before the Senate trial starts. The American people need to understand what Trump actually did." Tapper said, "I can work with that. When can we air it?" Schiff said, "Tonight if possible, tomorrow at the latest. The Senate vote is coming, and this information could matter." Vance stopped the playback. The silence was deafening. "That is you," Vance said simply, leaking classified intelligence to CNN, instructing the journalist how to disguise you as an anonymous source, and coordinating timing to influence the Senate impeachment trial. All on December 18, 2019, one day after you received that classified intelligence in a secure briefing, Senator Warner spoke up. His voice pained, "Mr. Vice President, I need to understand the legal basis for this recording. How was this call intercepted?" NSA Director Mitchell answered, "The call was intercepted pursuant to a FISA warrant issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in June 2025. The warrant targeted individuals suspected of unauthorized disclosure of classified information based on a pattern of classified intelligence appearing in media immediately after Senator Schiff received briefings. 3 federal judges found probable cause to authorize surveillance. Senator Angus King, the independent from Maine, asked, 3 judges approved surveilling a sitting senator? 3 judges reviewed extensive evidence and all found probable cause that he was compromising national security. FBI Director Wray confirmed the initial warrant and 2 renewals. The standard is extremely high for surveilling a member of Congress, and we met it because the pattern was undeniable. Vance brought the focus back to Schiff, saying, "Senator, that recording is from December 2019. Would you like to know when CNN aired a story with that exact classified information?" He didn't wait for an answer but pulled up a transcript. December 19th, 2019, CNN, Evening News. Jake Tapper reporting, quote, "According to officials familiar with classified intelligence briefings, evidence regarding President Trump's Ukraine communications is more damaging than previously reported. The intelligence includes intercepts and testimony from intelligence community officials." End quote. He looked up and said, "That aired less than 24 hours after your phone call. The language mirrors what you told him. The sourcing is exactly what you suggested. Officials familiar with the intelligence and you leaked classified information told him how to hide that you were the source, and it aired the next day." Schiff tried to respond, saying, "That story was about public impeachment matters. I was helping the public understand. You were disclosing classified intelligence." Vance cut him off. "The intercepts you mentioned, the testimony from IC officials, that was all classified. You received it in a classified briefing. You disclosed it to a journalist. And that is a crime." He paused and added, "And that is just one call. Let me show you the others." Vance clicked his remote, and a timeline appeared on the secure monitor at the front of the room. It displayed 5 years of data compressed into a visual representation that was damning in its clarity. For 18 months, Vance said, the NSA and FBI analyzed patterns of classified intelligence leaking to media. We identified 83 separate instances where classified information appeared in news articles shortly after Intelligence Committee briefings. Let me show you the pattern. He traced along the timeline. Each red dot represents a classified briefing. Each blue dot represents a news article containing information from that briefing. Notice anything? The pattern was obvious. Red dot, then blue dot, 1 to 3 days later, over and over for 5 years. Classified briefing, then immediately to media, repeatedly and systematically for 5 years straight. We cross-referenced attendance records to see who attended these 83 briefings. Multiple members attended some of them, but only one person attended all 83. He didn't need to say the name. Everyone knew. You were on the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2023, became ranking member in 2019, chairman in 2020 through 2022, then moved to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2023. You had perfect access throughout this entire period. He showed specific examples. The 15th of March 2020, classified briefing on Russian election interference. You attended. March 16th, you called Adam Goldman at the New York Times. March 17th, the Times publishes a story with specific details from that classified briefing details that could only have come from someone in the room. Another example, July 2021, classified briefing on Chinese cyber operations against U.S. infrastructure. You attended. Same day, you called Jake Tapper again. Next day, CNN runs a story describing Chinese capabilities that were only discussed in that classified briefing. August 2021, classified briefing on Afghanistan withdrawal intelligence. You attended, you called Shane Harris at the Washington Post, and 2 days later, the Post runs a story with classified intelligence assessments that were restricted to that briefing. He kept going, example after example. The pattern was undeniable. Briefing, call, article, briefing, call, article. Over and over, 83 times over 5 years. Senator Schiff, classified intelligence moved from the secure briefing room to your phone, to a friendly journalist, to a published article in less than 72 hours. That is not coincidence. That is systematic leaking. Senator Rubio asked, Mr. Vice President, how certain are we that the information in these articles came from Senator Schiff and not from someone else who attended the same briefings? Mitchell answered, we are certain because we have the phone records showing him calling journalists immediately after briefings. We have 17 recorded calls where he discloses the information, and we have 4 calls where he reads verbatim from classified documents. We can match his words to the documents, to the articles. It is not circumstantial. It is direct evidence. Vance showed the call records. Here is Senator Schiff's phone activity on days when he attended classified briefings. Notice the pattern. Within hours of leaving the SCIF, he is calling CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post. The calls average 12 to 20 minutes, which is not scheduling lunch, that is briefing journalists on what he just learned. He pulled up comparison data. Here is his call pattern on days when he didn't attend classified briefings. Totally different. Normal. Calls to staff, constituents, family. But on days with classified briefings, calls to journalists happen immediately after. Senator Susan Collins asked quietly, over 5 years, how many times did this pattern occur? 83 times that we can definitively document, Vance said. There may be more we haven't identified. These are the ones where the evidence is absolutely clear. Vance moved to his most damning evidence. Senator Schiff could argue that he was just sharing his general impressions of briefings, his interpretation of events, which would still be inappropriate, but he might claim it is not technically leaking classified documents. Let me show you why that defense doesn't work. He pulled up a classified document on the secure screen. Most of it was redacted for the public portions of the record, but key phrases were highlighted. This is a classified intelligence assessment from March 2020 regarding Russian election interference. It was briefed to the House Intelligence Committee on March 15th, and Senator Schiff attended that briefing. The next day, he called Adam Goldman at the New York Times, and the NSA intercepted that call. Let me play you part of it. The recording played Schiff's voice, reading in a careful, measured tone. The assessment states that Russian intelligence services are, quote, actively engaged in information operations targeting the 2020 election, end quote, with specific focus on, quote, amplifying existing divisions within the American electorate, end quote. The report identifies, quote, coordination between Russian military intelligence and social media influence operations, end quote. Vance stopped the recording and then pointed to the classified document on screen. Those phrases appear in this classified assessment, quote, actively engaged in information operations targeting the 2020 election, end quote, quote, amplifying existing divisions, end quote, quote, coordination between Russian military intelligence and social media influence operations, end quote. He showed a New York Times article from March 17, 2020, and those exact phrases appear in this Times article published 2 days after his call. He didn't paraphrase. He didn't summarize. He read verbatim from a classified document to a reporter, and then that reporter published it. Senator King looked stunned, saying, he was literally reading classified documents over the phone to journalists. We have 4 separate calls where he did exactly that, Mitchell confirmed. We have matched his words to classified documents to published articles. This wasn't him sharing his opinion about what intelligence meant. This was him disclosing classified intelligence word for word. Vance showed another example. June 2021, classified briefing on the Iranian nuclear program. He called Shane Harris at the Washington Post. Listen to this, he said, playing another recording of Schiff's voice. The intelligence indicates Iran has, quote, accelerated enrichment activities at the Fordow facility, end quote, reaching, quote, 60% enrichment levels, end quote, which the assessment describes as, quote, significantly reducing breakout time to weapons-grade material, end quote. A classified document appeared with the exact phrases highlighted, followed by a Washington Post article featuring those same phrases. 4 times we caught him doing this, Vance said, reading classified assessments to reporters, those reporters publishing it, compromising intelligence sources and methods. For what? So he could be on TV. So he could damage Trump. So he could position himself as the serious intelligence expert. He looked at Schiff and said, you weren't protecting national security. You were the threat to national security. Vance shifted to the money. Let's talk about why Senator Schiff was leaking. Ideology was part of it. He opposed Trump and wanted to damage him. But there was another motivation. Financial. He was getting paid. He pulled up publishing contracts. In February 2020, Warner Media, which at that time owned CNN, gave Senator Schiff a book deal. The advance was $2.1 million. For those unfamiliar with publishing, that is a massive advance, the kind of deal you give to presidents or major celebrities, not members of Congress. He showed the book, noting, the book was published in October 2021. It is called Midnight in Washington, How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could. It sold approximately 52,000 copies in its first year. That is actually decent for a political book, but nowhere near enough to justify a $2 million advance. D&I Reynolds walked through the economics. A hardcover book typically retails for $28 to $30. The author gets roughly 15% of that, so about $4 per book. To earn back a $2 million advance, the book would need to sell 500,000 copies. Senator Schiff's book sold roughly 1/10 of that. Warner Media lost approximately $1.5 million on this deal. Senator Warner asked, "That is not unusual, though, is it? Publishers often overpay for political books, betting they will become bestsellers." "True," Reynolds acknowledged, "but consider the timing." Schiff became chairman of the House Intelligence Committee in January 2019. That is when the leaks to CNN intensified dramatically. The book deal came in February 2020, 14 months into his chairmanship. The leaks continued through 2022. Then he left the House Intelligence Committee, and the CNN leaks dropped off significantly. He showed the correlation. We tracked CNN stories citing anonymous intelligence officials during Schiff's chairmanship from 2019 to 2022. CNN ran an average of 37 such stories per year. After he left the committee, that dropped to 9 per year. The pattern is clear. CNN was getting classified intelligence from him. They paid him $2 million for a book that lost money, and that wasn't a publishing deal, that was payment for services rendered. Vance added more evidence. We also found that Democratic political organizations bought bulk copies of his book. Courage to Change, PAC bought 20,000 copies for $85,000 and never distributed most of them. Democracy Alliance bought 15,000 copies. Several other progressive groups bought thousands each, totaling bulk purchases of approximately 80,000 copies. These bulk buys inflate sales numbers and guarantee the author hits royalty thresholds even if regular readers don't buy the book. It is how you launder money to politicians through book deals. The organizations buy books with donor money. The author gets royalties, and everyone pretends it is legitimate publishing. Senator Cotton asked, "Are you alleging CNN explicitly paid him to leak classified intelligence?" "We can't prove explicit quid pro quo," Vance admitted, "but the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming." He becomes intelligence chairman, starts leaking heavily to CNN, gets a $2 million book deal from CNN's parent company, continues leaking, leaves the committee, and CNN's access to leaks dries up. That is not coincidence. Vance moved to his final major evidence section. Everything we have discussed so far is about leaking, unauthorized disclosure, and serious crimes. But Senator Schiff might argue he was trying to inform the public about Trump's misconduct. Let me show you where it went, beyond leaking into active fabrication and lying. He pulled up video clips from September 2019 regarding the Ukraine whistleblower complaint that launched Trump's first impeachment. Here is what Senator Schiff said about it on national television. The clips played. Schiff on CNN, September 21, 2019, saying, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower." Schiff on MSNBC, September 23, saying, "The committee did not receive the complaint from the whistleblower. We learned about it through press reports." Schiff on ABC, September 25, saying, "We have no prior knowledge of the contents of the whistleblower complaint." Vance stopped the montage. He said that repeatedly. No contact with the whistleblower, no prior knowledge, found out through press reports. All lies. FBI Director Wray presented the evidence. We have phone records showing that Senator Schiff's staff contacted the individual later identified as the whistleblower before the formal complaint was filed. Multiple calls occurred between Schiff aide Daniel Goldman and the CIA analyst. Phone records appeared on the screen. August 12, 2019, Goldman calls a number associated with the analyst for a 23-minute call. August 14th, another call for 17 minutes. August 18th, another call for 19 minutes. These calls occurred before the whistleblower complaint was officially filed on August 12th. Wait, that couldn't be right. Vance corrected. The complaint was filed August 12th. Apologies. Ray corrected himself. The first call was August 8th. The formal complaint was filed August 12th. So these calls happened in the days immediately before and after the complaint was filed. Goldman was coordinating with the whistleblower, helping shape the complaint. He showed more evidence. We also have text messages between Goldman and the analyst discussing what should be included in the complaint, with Goldman suggesting specific language and specific facts to emphasize. This wasn't the committee passively receiving a whistleblower complaint through proper channels. This was committee staff actively creating the complaint, then pretending it came independently. Senator Collins looked shocked, asking, "So, the entire predicate for impeachment was fabricated by Chairman Schiff's staff?" "Fabricated is strong," Ray said carefully. The underlying facts about Trump's Ukraine call were real. But the whistleblower complaint wasn't organic. It was coordinated by Schiff's staff to create the appearance of an independent intelligence community whistleblower coming forward. Then, Schiff went on television and lied about having no prior contact. Vance played more clips. Schiff on CNN being asked directly if his staff had spoken to the whistleblower and responding, "We have no knowledge of that." The whistleblower came forward through proper channels to the Inspector General. "That is not spinning," Vance said. "That is not putting the best face on things. That is lying direct, explicit lying to the American people about his staff coordinating the impeachment complaint." For his final section, Vance brought in DNI Reynolds to describe the actual harm caused by Schiff's leaking. "We conducted a comprehensive damage assessment," Reynolds said, "looking at what intelligence was compromised by Senator Schiff's disclosures. The results are classified, so I can only speak generally, but the damage was significant." He outlined categories of harm. First, sources and methods. When he leaked details about intercepts, foreign governments learned we had access to their communications, and several intelligence collection operations had to be terminated because they were compromised by his leaks. Second, diplomatic relationships. Allied intelligence services share information with us under strict confidentiality agreements. When that information appeared in New York Times articles, our allies lost trust, and several liaison relationships were damaged. Third, operational security. When he leaked details about planned operations or intelligence assessments, adversaries gained advanced warning. At least 2 counterterrorism operations had to be canceled because he leaked details that would have exposed our intentions. Fourth, intelligence community morale. Analysts and operators risk their lives collecting intelligence, and when they see it immediately leaked to media by the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, it is devastating. We had analysts refuse to brief Congress because they didn't trust the information would stay classified. Reynolds looked at Schiff and said, "You didn't just break the law, Senator. You damaged the intelligence community's ability to protect this country. You burned sources, you compromised operations, and you destroyed Allied trust. For what? For TV appearances and a book deal?" The room was silent. The evidence was overwhelming. 17 recorded calls, 83 documented leaks, reading verbatim from classified documents, $2 million from CNN, lying about the whistleblower, and massive damage to national security. Schiff sat frozen, his face pale, unable to respond to any of it. 4 hours of evidence. Phone recordings of Schiff's voice leaking to journalists, a timeline showing 83 leaks matched to his briefings. Proof he read classified documents verbatim to reporters. Financial records showing CNN paid him $2 million. Proof he fabricated the whistleblower coordination, then lied about it. And a damage assessment showing burned sources and compromised operations. It was devastating, undeniable, career-ending at minimum, and prison-worthy, most likely. Chairman Warner looked at Schiff with something like pity and said, "Senator Schiff, you have heard 4 hours of evidence from the NSA, FBI, and DNI. You have an opportunity to respond. What do you have to say?" Schiff sat silent for a long moment. His mind was racing through options. Deny it? They had recordings of his voice. Claim it was taken out of context? They had 83 examples. Say he was helping the public? He disclosed classified intelligence, which is a crime regardless of motivation. Finally, he spoke, his voice lacking its usual confidence. This is political retaliation. This is the new administration weaponizing intelligence agencies to punish me for conducting oversight of Donald Trump. Everything I did was in service of my constitutional duty to inform the American people about threats to our democracy. You leaked classified intelligence. Vance interrupted flatly. We have you on tape doing it 17 times. That is not oversight. That is espionage. Schiff's voice rose, getting defensive as he said, I was trying to protect American democracy from a president who was compromised by Russia? By committing crimes yourself? Vance asked. By reading classified NSA intercepts to CNN? By taking $2 million from Warner Media while feeding them classified information? You weren't protecting anything. You were advancing your career and your bank account. Senator Rubio spoke up, saying, Senator Schiff, I want to give you a chance to address the specific allegations. Did you call Jake Tapper on December 18th, 2019, and disclose classified Ukraine intelligence? Silence. Schiff looked at the table. Rubio continued. Did you receive a $2 million book deal from CNN's parent company while leaking classified information to CNN? More silence. Did your staff coordinate with the Ukraine whistleblower before the complaint was filed, and then did you lie about having no prior contact? Schiff finally looked up, his voice quiet. I need to consult with counsel before answering these questions. Your counsel isn't here, Warner reminded him gently. We can delay. No. Schiff's voice was firmer. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I decline to answer on grounds that my answers might incriminate me. The room erupted. The implications were staggering. A sitting senator taking the fifth when asked about leaking classified intelligence. Vance waited for quiet, then asked a series of rapid-fire questions. Did you leak classified intelligence to journalists? Fifth Amendment. Did you read from classified documents during phone calls with reporters? Fifth Amendment. Did you receive payment from media companies you were leaking to? Fifth Amendment. Did you lie about coordinating the Ukraine whistleblower? Fifth Amendment. Vance sat back and stated, Let the record show that Senator Schiff has invoked the Fifth Amendment rather than answer questions about his leaking of classified intelligence. Senator Cotton spoke up, his voice hard. Mr. Vice President, based on the evidence presented, I move that this committee recommend the full Senate vote on expulsion of Senator Schiff for conduct unbecoming a member and for compromising national security. Second, Senator Rubio said, immediately. Warner looked pained, but nodded, saying, The motion is in order. We will vote after a brief discussion. The discussion was brief. Even Democrats on the committee couldn't defend the evidence. Senator King from Maine, an independent who caucused with Democrats, spoke for many of them. I have known Adam Schiff for years, and I respected his work on the Intelligence Committee, but this evidence is overwhelming. If a member of the Intelligence Committee is systematically leaking classified information, taking money from media companies, and lying about whistleblower coordination, they cannot continue to serve. I will vote for expulsion. The vote was unanimous, 15-0 to recommend expulsion. Warner looked at Schiff and said, "Senator, the full Senate will vote on your expulsion based on this evidence. I expect it will pass with a large bipartisan majority. You should consider resigning before that vote." Schiff stood up, his legs shaky, and said, "This is the end of democracy when speaking truth becomes a crime, when oversight is punished, when senators leak classified intelligence for money and fame, they go to prison," Vance said quietly. "That is not the end of democracy. That is the rule of law." As Schiff left the skiff, FBI agents were waiting in the corridor. "Adam Schiff, you are under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and making false statements to Congress." The handcuffs went on, and Miranda rights were read. The senator who had been the face of the Trump resistance was walked out of the Capitol in handcuffs. Within hours, the news leaked not the classified details, but enough. Senator Adam Schiff arrested on espionage charges. FBI confirmed systematic leaking to CNN and NYT, took Fifth Amendment on all questions. By morning, it was the biggest story in America. The Democratic hero arrested for leaking secrets. Even progressive media struggled to defend him as the evidence was too strong. Taking the Fifth made him look guilty, and the recordings of his voice were undeniable. The Senate didn't wait. Within a week, they voted on expulsion. The final tally was 78-22, as even many Democrats voted to expel because the evidence was too damning. Schiff's criminal trial began in April 2027. The prosecution presented the phone recordings, the matched leaks, the financial records, the whistleblower, lies, all of it. His defense tried everything, claiming he was exercising oversight duties, claiming the First Amendment protected his communications with the press, and claiming it was political persecution. None of it worked. The jury heard his voice leaking classified intelligence, saw the $2 million from CNN, and heard him lie about the whistleblower. He was found guilty on 12 counts: unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy, and false statements. Sentencing took place in August 2027. The judge showed no sympathy, stating, "Mr. Schiff, you held one of the most sensitive positions in our government, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. You had access to our nation's most important secrets, and you swore an oath to protect those secrets. You violated that oath systematically for 5 years. You leaked classified intelligence to advance your political career. You took money from media companies while feeding them secrets. You lied to Congress and the American people about whistleblower coordination. You damaged intelligence operations. You burned sources, and you compromised our relationships with allies. You did all of this while positioning yourself as the guardian of democracy. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. You will serve this sentence at a facility designated by the Bureau of Prisons, and you are permanently barred from holding any federal position." Adam Schiff entered federal prison in October 2027 at USP Lee in Virginia, and he is still there. With good behavior, he is eligible for release in 2038 at age 78. His legacy is destroyed. He is not remembered as Trump's brave opponent, but as a traitor who leaked secrets for money and fame. The lesson resonated through Washington. You can oppose presidents, you can investigate them, and you can vote to impeach them, but you cannot leak classified intelligence. You cannot take money from the media while feeding them secrets, and you cannot lie about fabricating whistleblower complaints. Eventually, the NSA will catch you. Eventually, your voice will be on recordings, and eventually, the evidence will be undeniable. Adam Schiff thought he was untouchable, thought his media platform protected him, and thought being the resistance hero made him safe. He was wrong. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him, and he is spending 15 years in prison because he thought leaking secrets was just politics. It wasn't politics. It was espionage. And espionage has consequences.